Welcome everyone to our webinar tonight that we've entitled The Role of a Football CEO. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Keith Wyness. Keith is based in the UK, and as you will see here, and probably you read in the emails that went out, he's the former CEO at Aston Villa, Everton, and Aberdeen FC, among numerous other experiences he has from the football industry, from the sports industry, which we'll dig deeper into tonight. So Keith, it's really great to have you here tonight. Welcome to this online webinar.
Diego, thank you very much, and a great good welcome to everybody around the globe. It's fabulous to see such a spread and such an interest from everybody in terms of football and really what goes on behind the scenes. And I hope to share some secrets with you tonight.
Fantastic, fantastic. For those of you that may not know who I am, I know some of you are regulars at our webinars, but those that are new to this SBI webinar, my name is Diego Valdez. I'm the Director General at the Sports Business Institute Barcelona. We are known mostly as SBI or SBI Barcelona. I'll give a little bit of background, but I won't take too much of our time tonight because we want to get to our guest speaker. But we're based in Barcelona, Spain, and we offer educational programs that are online, blended, and are focused on the business side of football. We've been in operation for over 11 years now, and in that time frame, we've had over 3,500 students from 90 plus countries. And we're very proud to say that our alumni are now working in a lot of these organizations that you see here on screen, plus many more. And it is because they are also taking their career after they finish our courses with us to the next level. But tonight is not about us, it's about you. And during this webinar that we've prepared for you with Keith, what we're going to be touching on is the role of the CEO, particularly based on Keith's experience as he's worked in numerous football clubs as the CEO. So he's going to be sharing his lessons with us. And we're going to be very attentive to everything he has to share because I've seen the presentation and I can already tell you that it's lots of very valuable insight from someone who's been at the top level for many years at football clubs and other organizations in sport. So we're going to turn it over to Keith in just a moment. At the end, we're going to briefly talk about our master's program, our Master in Football Business and Management, which, by the way, Keith will be lecturing once we kick off in October. And then we're going to open it up for your questions. We're going to have a Q&A where you can ask questions and have Keith answer them before we wrap things up. So Keith, at this point, what I'll do is I'll turn it over to you. I'll be controlling the slides, so you can tell me whenever you want me to move the slide, and we can get started. So over to you.
Well, thank you, Diego. And again, welcome everybody. I'm going to try and give you a real world look into what it is to be a chief executive and football club, the challenges that you face, the problems that you face, and of course the great side of it as well when things go well. But there are two slides I've just started with to give you a feeling of one thing I want to take you all to take from tonight's chat is that it is not what you think it's going to be. And I've said in the first slide here, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. The same thing happens in football. All of you, I'm sure, have got some ideas about how you think football clubs should be run. But let me tell you, from day one, when you get in there and you're the one in the hot seat, things come at you pretty fast. And that's the one thing you have to realize of how you're going to be able to manage and become a genuinely good chief executive. The second slide, please, Diego. And as Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. That was Mike Tyson. And I learned that pretty quickly, that what I thought I could do, I'd had all these great dreams and strategies and how I was going to take things forward. And then I got a phone call from one of the players saying, oh, by the way, my brother's been kidnapped by rebels in Africa. Could you handle the negotiations? Not the sort of thing you expect on a Monday morning when you come into work at a football club. But nevertheless, life comes at you pretty fast. So, Diego, again, please. To give you a bit of background, which I think a lot of you will be interested in to understand where I started in football and how I started in football, I had had a pretty good business background. I'd worked with the airline, British Airways, for about 6 years. I'd been in charge of the Concorde, the marketing of the Concorde. I'd done very well in the airline. I then went off and set up a cruise line where I had 12 years in Miami. And after the cruise industry experience, I was asked to go down to the Sydney Olympics in 1995. And I had 5 years managing the Sydney Olympics in the years leading up to the games themselves in 2000. So basically, I'd gone from travel into, I would call the Olympics travel plus sport. And then after the Olympics, I ended up in football. And I'll come on to that later as to how that all came about. But the thing I wanted to say there is because I came into football with a pretty good business background. I wasn't an ex-footballer. You can probably tell that I'm not really built for that shape, although people do say I am the back four. But nevertheless, I came in with a real business background and determined to try and bring some business skills to the job of chief executive at a football club. And the way I actually ended up with Aberdeen, I kept my eyes open, obviously, and been looking around all the time, as all of you must do if you want to get into the game. You must be immerse yourself in the news of what's happening at football. And while I was back in Aberdeen, I realised that the chief executive at the time had been fired on his first day. And I just picked up the phone and said, look, this is my experience. I'd like to be considered for the chief executive. And I was in there in that afternoon, had an interview, and I was the new chief executive at Aberdeen Football Club. Now, Aberdeen is my hometown, and I'd grown up as a young boy supporting the club. So to me, this was just the dream. It really was. And I'm sure for many of you, it would be the job to go to your childhood team. And I've been lucky enough to do it on a couple of occasions. But it does give you that extra, extra feeling that you want to do well and do things correctly. So what did I find on day one when I went in there? Well, a lot of problems in Aberdeen. Sky TV, which was the main broadcast deal for Scottish football, had just finished. Those of you that have ever looked at the Scottish League will know that Rangers and Celtic are the two dominant teams that control that league. And they had rejected the Sky deal because they felt they needed more. But the rest of the teams, it was basically our major revenue source. So on day one, I arrived with our major revenue source disappearing. Now, Rangers and Celtic are called the Old Firm. It goes back in history as the Old Firm. And the Old Firm were then looking now to put up a new media deal, and they wanted 80% of the revenue and give the other 10 clubs in the league 20%. And so straight away, I'm into a problem with how can you exist with that sort of deal that's completely unfair and designed for them to carry on dominating the league. The league was very fractured, as I say. The media environment with the newspapers are very hostile. The Rangers and Celtic come from Glasgow, which is the biggest city in Scotland, and they control the media to a great extent. And I was in Aberdeen, which is much further north, about 100 miles north from Glasgow. And I was seen as the outpost, and I had to give our fans the belief that I was going to fight for fairness and that I was going to also stand up and make sure that things were right. So on day one, I had a fight of great proportions on my hands, and that was going to take up so much time. So forget initial ideas about new training grounds and helping with new ways of recruitment and helping the academy, etc. I was into war straight away in the first day. And when I say war, what actually happened was that, and I'll come on to this, is that we ended up having to resign from the league, 10 clubs resigning from the league in what is still probably the biggest battle of any football league in the world. Along with that, I had problems with a poor stadium facilities. The stadium held 22,000 capacity, but it was way, way old, and we just had nothing fit for modern day entertainment purposes. And so the fan experience was very poor. And the fans had felt a little bit disenfranchised. They felt remote from the club. They felt as though they hadn't really been looked after. There was no real spirit. The team hadn't done well in recent years. They had a glorious history. And Aberdeen, as many of you will know, won the European Cup Winners' Cup. Hard to believe, but in the semi-final, they beat Bayern Munich. And in the final, they beat Real Madrid. Hard to believe that they could do it. And I believe still to this day, Aberdeen is still the only club that's beaten Real Madrid in a European final. And at that time, we had the famous manager, Sir Alex Ferguson. So we had a great heritage and a great pedigree in Aberdeen, and the fans were rightly proud of it. But unfortunately, it was difficult to see how the club had sort of gone past its glory days and things were fading. The revenues were in trouble, etc. So it was a difficult situation to walk into on day one, amplified, as I say, by having to handle this revenue situation. Thanks, Diego. So, civil war erupted in the league. Myself and 9 other chief executives got together and we decided we would leave the league. I still have some of the press clippings from that day, and it was the biggest story in Scotland by far, and it carried on for many weeks. We actually did resign from the league and we left Rangers and Celtic in the league themselves. And so we said, okay, you can be like the Harlem Globetrotters. You can go off and play yourselves as many times as you want to. But they soon realized that the value of a league is in the strength of the number of clubs that are in it, and that everybody has to be treated more fairly. In the end, we won the battle of getting 50% of the revenue for the 10 clubs rather than 20%. And so it actually meant there was a slight improvement on what we'd had before. So overall, the battle was won. And the wounds are still there today, though, I think, in many areas. I still, when I go back to Scotland, I could be met at an airport. Taxi drivers will still recognise me and talk about those days of the civil war in Scottish football. But I believe strongly that fans need to see the chief executive take a stand. Now, in Aberdeen, the chairman and the owner was pretty shy about the media. And this is something that you have to learn as a chief executive. You have to measure carefully. Does your owner want to be the face of the club? Does he want to speak out in public or not? If not, the fans do want to see a face of the club. And so it will fall on you as chief executive to do that. I've been in both situations when I've had to be in the background, completely quiet, which is great. But I've also been, as I said, at the forefront and the person that has to be the face of the club, do the media interviews, etc. It has to be one or the other, depending on the owner you're going to have. So please take that into account, that that's a role that you may have to play, but it's going to be crucial in terms of fan engagement, media engagement, and other things as well. So straight away, with all the problems I had, I thought, right, what are we going to try and do to instill some excitement back in the fan base? And one was to try and create a new stadium project, which we did. And quickly we put together a potentially new stadium and got the fans now thinking about the future and started to change the narrative from old stadia, old problems, into thinking about the new ones. What could happen? What would it look like? What do the new fans need? And all of a sudden, I changed the narrative from what was the old-fashioned Aberdeen into what could be the Aberdeen of the 2000s going forward. They had a chance to reboot their ambition for the club and to get young kids involved, because suddenly, if you've got a plan for a stadium that may be 5 years, 10 years away, young kids are going to start to be interested in that because they're going to be coming of age. So we gave them a dream to hang on to. That was important. We started to do other things. We were trying to be innovative again. We wanted to give some impetus to what Aberdeen was. And in Scotland, some of you may have seen in the Euros recently, the Scottish fans were quite famous for having a bit of a party, the Tartan Army. And so many of them come from the Aberdeen area. So we linked closely with that. And we started to give ourselves more of a Scottish feeling that we were the ones that really stood for Scotland in terms of the tartan, the history. And we were the ones that really gave an image to the club, and we were the warriors for Scotland. And so I created that image along with the history of that image, but also going into the future and starting to create a picture that the chief executive could then sell to the fans through different initiatives as we went forward. I was lucky enough in 2003 to have the centenary of the club. The 100 years of Aberdeen Football Club started in 1903. And that gave me a chance. And the ambition was to put on 100 events in 1 year for the centenary. And we recreated so many different things, invited many speakers up. We had how was art involved in football? How was music involved with football? We did so many things, school visits, etc. We invited Bayern Munich and Hamburg across to play at Aberdeen again. I took Liverpool up to play. Many different things that gave us a chance to really let the city be very excited and get back in love again with the football club. It all takes energy, it all takes thought, and it all takes ambition. And that's what the chief executive has got to drive, and he has got to be able to do that straight away. Now, as I said at the start, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So here we are on the centenary. I've got all these great plans going on. And we actually had a centenary dinner with the local city council at a place called the Beach Ballroom in Aberdeen, for any of you that may have ever been there. And the city hosted this dinner to celebrate the 100 years of the football club. It was a beautiful dinner, all very formal, speeches, etc. And we had a game the next day against Dundee. I'm in the boardroom at about 1 o'clock the next day on the Saturday, and I get a knock on the door. The assistant manager comes in to see me. He says, "Keith, could I just please have a quick word?" I said, "Certainly. What is it, Duncan?" He said, "The manager got so drunk at the party last night, I'm afraid he can't make the game." Never before in the history of football have I ever heard anything like this before, where a manager is so drunk he can't actually turn up and fulfill his duties as the manager of the club. A bit of a crisis, as you can imagine. So again, these things that come at you that you could never expect, never ever dream of, all of a sudden it's there in real life, and you have to handle these sort of things. So that was the new manager disaster. Along with that, another one that's of a similar story of things that just happen out of the blue. The players had their Christmas party in Glasgow, and after one of the games, they were going to head off down to Glasgow to go and have the Christmas party. And I warned them all. I said, "Look, guys, please enjoy yourselves. But at the moment, the tabloid media in Britain are looking for things to really have a go at football players about. So please behave yourselves. Enjoy it by all means, but please don't give me any problems." So 2:30 in the night, I get a phone call. "Hello, Keith. This is the Deputy Chief Constable of Strathclyde Police in Glasgow. We have one of your players arrested for attempted murder." So, it's just one of those things, I suppose, in the life of a CEO that you can never expect. And yet you have to handle all these things as they come thrown at you. People never talk about them. And, there's no credit for it. All the fans care about is the score on a Saturday. But believe me, as chief executive, you're responsible for so much more than that. So that was 4 years that I had in Aberdeen. I was then headhunted to go to Everton, which we'll come on to in a second. But it was 4 great years. I learned so much as my first 4 years in football. Although I'd been a football fan, I had now learned the reality of what the buttons are that you had to push. I created new revenue streams, and so I left the club in a much safer commercial position. We'd fought all the battles we had to. We'd established a way forward for the club, and it was a great way forward. Now, one thing is, I say my last line there is about moving closer to Sydney. When I'd been in the Olympics, I'd met my wife and married her and convinced her to come from Bondi Beach in Sydney to Aberdeen Beach in the north of Scotland, which is probably one of my best sales jobs I've ever done. And then when we'd been in Aberdeen, I'd said to her that, look, maybe after Aberdeen, maybe we'll go back to Sydney. So when I was offered the job at Everton, I had to convince her that we were moving closer to Sydney, but not quite there. And so we went down to Everton in England, which is the next slide, Diego. Thank you. So Everton, I thought Aberdeen was bad, but when I got into Everton, what a mess as well. And the first few days. The last chief executive, who's a gentleman called Trevor Birch, who is now very high up in the EFL, the English Football League. He's the chief executive there. A great guy, but he had got so frustrated after 30 days, he had resigned from Everton. I was introduced at an EGM, not an AGM. An AGM is an annual general meeting. An EGM is an extraordinary general meeting. This is because the fans were in full revolt about the way the club was being run and what was being handled. I also learned on the first morning that the bank, Barclays Bank, who we banked with, the club was on the intensive care list for the bank. And so there were pretty drastic financial restrictions on the club. The board that had hired me were in civil war. They were fighting amongst themselves in a power battle about different things. So it wasn't a great environment, as you can imagine. So the first morning I was there, and the point will come on in a little bit there, I had to sell Wayne Rooney, which many of you may know. Wayne Rooney had to sell to Manchester United. So that was the first thing I did. And you can imagine, here he is, the young, great superstar of the club. And the fans weren't happy with me, but it had to be done. I had to reorganize the club's finances. I had to make some quick and very tough decisions. And that was one of them that we had to do. The other issues I found was that the training ground was completely unfit for purpose. The manager I had, some of you may know, is David Moyes. He was the manager at the time, and he was training on a training ground that was probably fit for purpose back in 1960, 1970. And I could recognize that we weren't going to be able to advance the club unless we did something about that. The club was way overstaffed. We probably had about 300 more staff than we needed, a huge amount of thing. There was fraud everywhere. People were walking out with cases of wine, food from the kitchens. It was just a disaster in terms of how the whole thing was happening. And as I say, on top of that, I had to sell Wayne Rooney as my very first move. So again, welcome to the warm, cozy world of football, and how you think it's going to be easy to pick out some textbooks, look at some case studies, and set your business plan together and then reenact it. Believe me, it's a different reality when you actually get in there. Thanks, Diego. There was huge fan unrest. I'll never forget that first extraordinary general meeting. There were 400 Everton fans in there, and they seemed to be all like dockers from the ports, all very angry. And I think every one of them wanted to break me in half at that moment. It wasn't exactly a warm reception. But I felt as though all I could say to them was, look, judge me by my actions and not my words, and let me get stuck into this. And they respected me and they let me have a go. I had the staff in 7 different locations around Goodison Park and completely disunited. Nobody had control over the whole agenda of work. And so it was just a very strong negative subculture. People had got used to just doing everything for themselves. There was no unity. And the club was just seemed to me to be in free fall. And yet, this was Everton, a major club, one of the founding clubs of the Football League, one of the founding members of the Premier League, the club that very few people realise, but it is the most senior club in Liverpool. It has been there longer than Liverpool. It played at Anfield before Liverpool did. Everton is a great historic club, a very proud club. There are more Everton fans in Liverpool than there are Liverpool fans. And it was something that I soon learnt the heritage and the tradition meant so much. And I talked to a guy called Brian LeBone, who's one of the great ex-players. And one afternoon, I just sat with him. I said, look, Brian, tell me the history. Tell me what this means to people. And he did. And we went through the whole thing. And I'd never been more moved and to really understand the club. So it's important, if you're going to be a chief executive and you're going to front up that club, understand what the club means to people, really understand it, get it, and really immerse yourself in the history and understand it, because that will be authentic. And you have to be authentic if you're going to carry the fans with you. Thanks, Diego. So I had to look for the positives. What did I have apart from all these negatives? What could I focus on? Well, David Moyes had been there 2 years. He was a strong manager, a little bit raw, around the edges. He was still very angry and very passionate manager, but he had settled in and he was starting to get the respect of the squad in some ways. As I mentioned, there was a really strong heritage and history of the club. The squad was cohesive and they were looking as though they could all sort of perform to a genuine level, and they were responding well to the manager. So I had those sort of things on my side. And also, it couldn't really get any worse. That was the whole thing. We'd lost the first game of the season before I'd arrived 6-1 at home to Arsenal. And so the fans, not only were they in revolution, the club looked as though the team was going to start losing some heavy games. But no, we felt there was still something there we could salvage. And it was up to me to rebuild that internal spirit. And this is how I went about trying to do it. Thanks, Diego. I wanted to give the manager and the squad some hope. So again, I went into looking at a new facility. And pretty quickly, we had the ideas of a brand new training ground. We managed to put all the artist impressions together. and we showed it was working. We engaged the manager and the coaches and the players in terms of what they wanted out of a new training ground. And again, we got people to focus on the future. Now, that's okay, just giving them a new idea, but you've got to follow through and deliver. And I'm pleased to say that we did. It took us in the third year of my time there, but we delivered Finch Farm, which is probably still now one of the best training grounds for Premier League clubs. So that changed the mindset because they could see that things again were starting to move. So that was important that internally we felt that there was things moving in the right direction. Also, it gave the fans on the outside the rumours of the new training ground, the feeling that something was happening. That was important as well. I combined all the staff into one location. I let go of quite a few of the staff, probably about 250 in the end, and some I had to make an example of because unless they were going to follow our lead and to really drive and follow the way forward, sometimes you've got to make some very hard decisions. And as chief executive, one of the things you must always look at is who are the key people that drive the culture within the club. It isn't always the senior people. It's often the lady who comes around with the tea or the person that sits by the water cooler on a Monday morning. Who is it the one that really spreads the word and the gossip around the club? You've got to be aware of that. Get them on side and also start to bring a new younger leadership team, which is what I did. And I gave them clear goals and I showed that I was very able and willing to work with them to be part of it and to do some of the hard things that I was asking them to do. And pretty soon I had their respect. I had a young team working with me and we had pretty clear goals. All the staff were in one place, so nobody could end up disappearing for the day or for a couple of hours at a time. And suddenly they were starting to see that things could feel pretty good. And suddenly, it was all round the club, right from the dressing room, right the way through to the executive rooms. Things were starting to change. We had some quick commercial wins. I managed to work with our commercial team there. We got some quick new sponsorships in. So again, the whole ball was starting to spin and to roll in the right direction. We were picking up some speed. And in every area of the club, changes were happening. We had a club shop that I think had, from memory, I won't make it up, but it was something like we had about 40 XXXL shirts left when there was a need for mediums and smalls. We've been buying things wrong, so immediately we were losing about £1 million a year on retail. I changed that and outsourced that immediately, and we turned that into a £2 million profit in the first year. Catering, again, we outsourced again from having in-house where there's massive fraud going on, and we turned that into a profit. So suddenly, the bank was off our back again from being on the intensive care list. They started to talk about us being a case study of how to turn things around. And when you get the bank working with you, you're getting that support, then it frees up that ability to start doing more positive things. And so it's all about starting that feeling of change and making those things happen. We also wanted to have much better fan communication, which of course is crucial. And as I said earlier, the chief executive often has to be the face of that. At Everton, I was lucky to have a chairman who did a lot of public speaking, and so I took more of a back seat. But I did a lot more of the visiting the fan clubs, going out on a Monday night, a Tuesday night, a Wednesday night to see them in far off places, making the effort, and it was always appreciated. And so I took that sort of role behind the scenes of meeting the fans, and again showing that change could happen. So these are the things again that are never get seen, never get shouted about, but it's those hours that you get home late at night and you're up early the next morning, but you're putting those efforts into the fans, and it does get appreciated over time. But as chief executive, you have to show by example that you're going to be doing it. The external environment then picked up. The local newspapers started to support what we were doing, and all of a sudden the snowball had happened, and we were moving forward. And I'm pleased to say that first year, from that terrible start we had, we actually qualified for the Champions League. We came fourth in the Premier League. And so that's probably one of my most favourite seasons of all the time in football. And when you felt that after all the hard work you had done, it really was worth it. And that just shows it can be done. And if you really put the effort into it, we got that reward. Liverpool finished 5th, which in our area, that means a lot if we finish 4th. And it hasn't been the same since. But there we go. It was a very interesting turnaround. And the following 3 years that I was with the club, 4 years with the club, a lot happened. But unfortunately, again, a disastrous ending for me. I probably would have still been at the club had it not been for politics. There was the chairman got involved with a guy who lent him some money, and he became a shadow director, which is illegal in terms of the way you run companies in the UK. And I was being asked to do things that I wasn't prepared to do. And so I actually resigned, much against my better judgment, but well, my wife's better judgment, because in 2008, if you remember, we were coming into the world's financial crisis. And I think my wife's favorite phrase to me was, "Why do you have to have morals when we're going into the world's biggest crisis?" But of course, I believe you must have morals and you must do what's right, because in football, you'll be around a long, long time. And if you take the easy way, I always believe it will find you out in the future. So that's one thing I will mention again at the end. I'd ask you all to consider that even though it might be painful short term, do the right thing. It's very important, because you will be seen in the future in your career that at that time you've done the right thing, even though it may be short term difficult. Thanks, Diego. And then after Everton, I had a break from club football. I was chief football advisor to Oman in the Middle East. I worked in India. I did work in North America, in Asia and Australia. Did a lot of work with different clubs, buying and selling, and had a great time. But the lure of club football and being a chief executive did come back to me. And I was offered the chance to, from a new Chinese owner at Aston Villa, to go and be the chief executive at Aston Villa. So as I say here, he was a new Chinese owner, and that was the time, if many of you may remember, there was a big bubble of interest from China in terms of acquiring clubs in Europe. Probably Wolverhampton Wanderers is probably still the only one that's left from the clubs in Europe that the Chinese owned. And there was a big push at the start, and certainly this Chinese owner came in. The club had just been relegated from the Premier League, and so I was brought in with a new owner when the club had just been relegated. And again, we had a bloated staff count. Again, for some reason, it was probably about 250, 300, too many staff. And of course, you have to think, are you a championship club, or are you a championship club that's in waiting to go back in the Premiership? And you've got to make those judgments, and those things come from experience. And if you haven't got the experience, one of the lessons you should learn is ask somebody with experience and ask them what they would do. And you'll find people always trying to help you if they can do. And I'm always available to answer questions if I can do at some stage, either tonight or in LinkedIn down the road. But the other thing, again, as in Everton, I couldn't believe it. We had huge fraud. This one was quite unusual. And again, this is another one of these weird things that happened that I would never have expected. The head chef had bought some allotments, which is where they grow vegetables, about the size of a football pitch. And he had grown vegetables there and then had resold it back to the club at inflated prices. Every pint of milk that was coming into the club had his tax and his surcharge on it. And in the end, when we counted, £10 million had been defrauded from the club through the chef and his little game. So that should have been spotted long before. But because I knew the numbers of what things should really be in a budget, I was able to spot it quickly, and we were able to work out around this what was happening, and then how we could put a stop to it. It was very scary, should I say. I mean, obviously, it was almost like organized crime, and you're up against some pretty unsavory characters. But at that time, Aston Villa was becoming what I would say was more a catering club that played football rather than a football club that had catering. And so it was a very important distinction. And I wanted us to refocus back on football, become a football club again, not worry about some of the distractions. And it was really important that we did that and that we refocus back on football, because to get back up from the Championship in England is a very tough battle to get up there. So we had to do that. The new owner had come in from China. He thought he knew everything about football because he'd watched the games on TV. And so I had a whole new education process for a new owner. A chief executive, you will find that, depending on who the owner is. The owner you've got may be one of the new owners that comes in with the money and wants the kudos for football. He may be a genuine football fan. Hopefully you're lucky, but then he may make the wrong decisions because he is a fan. You've got to be very careful about how you handle your owner. And that's the role of the chief executive, to be a real diplomat and to make sure that you handle them the right way. In this case, this Chinese owner had come in, and the very first afternoon when he just bought the club, he interviewed two potential managers and he picked one. He picked him because he had a business degree. Now, I would not say that was the right qualification to hire a manager, but nevertheless, he'd done it. And I thought, okay, he didn't listen to my advice. And so 12 games later, I have to fire that manager. And the owner suddenly realizes he didn't know what he was doing and he left me to run the club properly. We hired a new manager, stabilized the first season. And in the second season, we got into the playoff final at Wembley to get back in the Premiership. The squad was completely unbalanced. And again, I didn't have a sporting director at the time because we'd bought the club and I had come in, let me think, July, early July, and the season started early August. In that 3 or 4 weeks, with no sporting director, I had to negotiate 12 transfers out and 12 transfers in. So that's 24 different transactions and business deals that we had to do. They do say in football that for every transfer you do, there are probably 5 that you negotiate that don't actually happen. And I would say that's true. So there's probably about 125 different negotiations that I was going on with during that month. It was driving us crazy, but we did it, and we supported the manager and got the squad turned around and tried to get some squad balance back into it in terms of age, profile, etc. So in this case, I had got involved very heavily in the football side because there was just no other option. It was just had to be done. There was no other existing football sporting director. I hired one quickly, and then he was able to take the load off me as we went forward. But we had to reinvent the whole football side and recreate Aston Villa as a football team, which was quite a battle at the time. Thanks, Diego. The other negatives we had there were the staff structure. Again, the staff were spread all over the place. They were in 5 different locations. There was zero technology in the club. It was really being run by an abacus rather than run by computers. We had no real customer records. And this is a club, Aston Villa, that were a very big club. And yet I was amazed as to how it had been left in the dark ages. The previous owner that the Chinese guy had bought it from was an American called Randy Lerner. And I think Randy left having lost about £250 million. But what he'd spent it on were things like superb stained glass windows that were in the hospitality area, great new box offices, great new seats in the director's box. He hadn't spent it on the important things, and certainly had taken very bad advice in terms of the football squad. So you're coming up against these issues, and for me, certainly, and with the experience I developed with Aberdeen and Everton, I was able quickly to see where the focus had to be, and that's where we started to work on getting the team together to re-energize the club, to bring in the right IT, and that was something that again started the ball rolling for me. We already had the stadium, we had a training ground, but we had to reinvent the club and show everybody that we were moving forward. And that's the one I wanted to push, was the IT, and to really show the club was thinking about the future. And we did experiments. That's when virtual reality was just coming in. And I realized that in China, virtual reality had been adopted by more in the population than any other country in the world. So we worked with Nokia on new cameras for virtual reality, and we were on the verge of selling season tickets for virtual reality headsets in China. We were way ahead of the game. We also had the first season ticket that actually doubled as a credit card. And the idea there was that while you were spending on your credit card, we could see for the potential sponsors at the club, we could actually show them real money that was being spent by our fan base on their products. So whether it was Gillette, we could actually say, look, our fans have spent £3 million on your product. This is a real number we've got from the credit card. So we were trying to make those advances and to try and move things forward. And gradually the external environment started to change as we move forward. Thanks, Diego. There were great facilities. This is another one, another story. If if you don't indulge me here on another one, punch in the mouth, because we had a great training ground. And those of you that may have read this in Britain, there has been a big project in Britain called HS2, which is the high-speed railway. Now, believe it or not, the rail line was plotted and it was announced it was going to go right through our training ground. So it was incredible. We were in the House of Commons, the House of Lords. We had a battle on our hands of how we were going to do that. Anyway, it's a long story, but again, I'd never thought that I'd ever be seeing a new train line being put right through the pitches of my under-16s, under-17s and first team. So we had to handle that sort of issue as well, which takes up time and distracts you from what you really want to do of get the football club back into being a football club. We had a great fan base, superb fan base. Birmingham's the second biggest city, and there's a great tradition and heritage in Aston Villa. And so we were lucky there that they stayed with us. I did have some very high quality staff, and I hand selected those to form, again, a strong team to back me, a small team, but one that was completely loyal. And wherever I've been, I've always made sure that my number two ends up getting my job when I move on. And in this case, the same thing happened. And so it was very important that that team saw the loyalty. I really believed in management by walking around, which meant I wasn't in my office at all, waiting for them to come to me. I was out there on the shop floor, meeting with everybody, seeing what the problems they were facing, and really just being visible. And that's also a key thing. We were lucky with celebrity fans, which is something now in social media, which is crucial. Prince William luckily became, well, he is an Aston Villa fan, but he became a friend because he visited the games quite a lot. Tom Hanks, people like that helped us immensely when social media was just really starting to grow. Nowhere near as big as it is today, but still, social media was big. We're talking here about 2016 to 18, and things were starting to happen. And I put in a system that we had an early warning system so that every 30 minutes we would check for any buzzwords on social media that would tell us if there was a storm brewing amongst the fans, what the issues were. And those are the things that we started to really be responsive. And again, to create that snowball rolling forward of a feeling that something's happening within the club. Thanks, Diego. So we spoke with a different tone of voice about the club moving forward. We had the subculture, and the people that were the real influencers I mentioned, they were the ones I recruited as part of my leadership team. And it was a young team, and we had a very clear strategy. And that's the biggest thing that a chief executive can do, is give clear signs of leadership. Not necessarily all the detail. That's, I think, impossible. As I've said, things come at you too quick, but you've got to give the clear signposts as to where you want to go. Cost control. We really got into it and managed it, really, and made it something very important that people started to respect their workplace and understood everything, every penny they spent, it was like theirs. And so we made them conscious of cost control. The environment, I put in a whole new staff canteen. I put in a staff gym. I made the staff feel worshipped, not worshipped, respected. And they were, coming to work, expected to work very hard. They put in a lot of hours. And so they should have some great benefits. And so that was greatly appreciated. And again, it's returned in terms of the work ethic that the staff have. The human side as well. I think I've always been very approachable. And when people have problems with family or problems at home or illness, it's important that you show that you are an empathetic leader, that you can really be somebody that people will come to and they will respect, and that you will do the right thing. And that goes through the whole core of the club very quickly when these stories get talked about. And it's the one way that you can bind everybody together. And say being human and going above and beyond. Sometimes you've got to do that because it does pay dividends in terms of the whole culture of the club. And communication. Never be frightened to give bad news, but also be sure that you tell it in a measured way, and also that you've got a solution. That when you do explain what it is, what the problem is, and how you think you're going to handle it. Always communicate and speak to people and ask them what they think you should be doing as well, and hear their opinions. Sometimes they got much better ideas than you, and so it's important that you communicate. And as I say, I like to outsource. It's one of my things that I always like to outsource because it allows me to bring in new innovations more quickly. And I think particularly today with technology moving so fast, artificial intelligence is the key thing that's moving. And if I was in a club right now, I would be right at the forefront of artificial intelligence, and I'd be working with the right experts in key areas to make sure we were leading. So I do think that today that's one area that all of you should be paying attention to, whether it's artificial intelligence in terms of, how you recruit new players, the performance of existing players, all those sort of things that you've got to be looking at as well. Thanks, Diego. The HR examples. Well, again, we I won't go into too much detail, but we did manage to promote young people that perhaps were not as experienced, but they grew into it very quickly. And I learned not to be too frightened to promote people and give them the chance. And that's one thing that in Villa really came through. They're all still there to this day, and the good ones, and they're the ones that got given a chance. And I'm never frightened now to actually do that. Never 100 people out of 100, but certainly there should be a proportion of young stars that you believe. You'll feel it in yourself as to who's got a potential, and it's important to try and do that. I tried to get that blend of experience and youth, and that was important, and also to try and give that stability. And as I say, to try and find that blockbuster, whether it was the virtual reality, whatever it would be, something that would get people talking about the club again. Once again, though, this one ends with a disastrous punch in the mouth. I'm afraid our Chinaman had run out of money completely. He was a complete fraud. He's still in jail for another 3 or 4 years still. And we were left with a mess. And then the club was sold on to new owners. And all the hard work that we'd done, those new owners were the beneficiaries of it. And the club is now doing incredibly well. They've just qualified for Champions League as well. And I'm proud to say that the team that got the promotion, 80% of that squad were the ones that I hired. The new training ground is now probably the best it could ever be. It's probably the best one in Britain right now. After us solving the problem with the train going through, which it did, it went through, but we managed to negotiate for new land and rebuild the whole thing. So all the battles we fought, we didn't have the chance to benefit from it, but the new owners have done. But I've got to say they've done a great job, and they're very good owners. I just wish I was working with them to be able to see the fruit of the labours that we've done. So it was an unfortunate ending, but there we go. That's the story for Villa. But again, as chief executive, you get used to these sort of things. Thanks, Diego. So I'll just round up with a couple of things here. The pace of change in football is something you never get used to. Football itself doesn't really change that much in some ways, but in other ways, it's continually changing. And you have to learn to be able to feel the rhythm of a season. You have to understand when things have to be done. And that comes from experience. And as I say, talking to people with experience is very important. The unknown unknowns. That's a phrase, I think it was Donald Rumsfeld in America that mentioned that. And the unknown unknowns are exactly those sort of things I've mentioned to you that you've got no idea and you can never guess are going to come to you. But you've got to become an expert in being unflappable. You've got to take a deep breath and go, okay, that's today's problem. How are we going to solve this one? And you've got to show the staff that you're prepared to be flexible and innovative and handle those unknown unknowns. And gradually over time, you will learn that it just becomes part of the job. And things that don't surprise you end up still surprising you, but perhaps not as much as they used to. You learn that human beings are a pain to deal with, whether it be players who are spoilt sometimes, whether it be some staff who are got unreasonable expectations. But never forget, football is all about human beings. This isn't a factory where we produce a commodity. It's all about human beings. And so you've got to be a genuine humanist, and you've got to learn that. Even though human beings can be a pain, you've got to try and really dig deep, learn your psychology, and learn to really understand things and understand people, and try and work out the reasons why things aren't going correctly for some people, and how you can help them. When I was at Aberdeen, there was a chief executive at Kilmarnock, one of the teams in Scotland, who talked to me about his 88th minute deflected free kick theory. And it really hit home with me because he said, Keith, he said, look, he said, I've spent all year building my business plan. He said, I've done it in great detail. all the revenue numbers were going to be met. But then we had an 88th minute deflected free kick going against us, and I missed my budgets. And that's the sort of thing that in football, you've got to realise it is the 88th minute deflected free kick that you can never judge for. I remember when I'd hired a new chief financial officer at Everton, he'd come in, and one of the biggest things that you'll have to do in terms of forecasting as a chief executive is you often have to work out how many cup games should we budget for and what position in the table should we budget for. Well, in this case, he just arrived, and we had got a very good draw in the FA Cup against a team called Oldham, which was from a very lower division. And so you would confidently expect us to be able to say, we'll win that and move forward. I said to him, no, we're going to do no more budget than 2 rounds of the cup. He said, but we've got Oldham. We'll easily beat that. And we've already done one, no problem. Of course, we lost at home to Oldham. So never over forecast. I know the temptation will always be there to think that you've then got more revenue to spend, but please, forecast sensibly. And that's the important thing. When it comes to business plans, and this is one key message, in football, we talk about the spine of a team. When we go through goalkeeper, centre half, midfield, striker, I think a business plan should be the same. It should be the spine of a plan. Don't get dragged into too much detail. Delegate that as much as you can, but keep control of those major signposts. That's your job, is to give that area and to work with your staff to do that. But don't get bogged down in the detail. Make it the spine of a plan. Really be involved in the social media and the media noise. Understand it. Today, it's absolutely crucial, and you've got to be ahead of that. You've got to be putting out positive messages, positive stories, and the skill of using social media now is so important with influencers and different things. The club is in a great position in its community. People want it to succeed, and you can be clever, you can be innovative, and you should be. I remember I did one transfer announcement that went viral. I had American radio stations calling me up about it. We had over about 2 million hits. And if you get it right, it can be the most cost-effective thing that you can ever do. So please pay attention to the media noise and the social media, but also don't listen too much to the media noise. Understand that, today's newspapers are tomorrow's fish and chip papers. That is very true. And so it's important that you try and keep a balance on all things and not get dragged into public debates and public fights with the media. Now, one thing here is pretty academic. Going back to my university days, there was an economist called William Beaumont, and he talked about the disease of what's called satisficing. And that's really all about people and staff who believe that doing the satisfactory is enough. I always want to drive my staff to excel, and you should be trying to do the same and expect them to do the best as well. So it's very important that we don't just accept satisfactory. We don't, anybody that does that should be told clearly that's not what you expect, and you expect more from them. And you've got to lead by example. And that's the only way that you'll develop the culture that will feed into the team, and the team will eventually start winning, and your job becomes that little bit easier. So please, satisfactory is not a good word. Thanks, Diego. So how do you manage? Well, as I said, people are key. Handpick your leadership team. Very important. And it's important that you're networking. As I say, network like crazy, 24/7. Everybody in the game in different parts of the world, whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're in social media forums, things like this, everything you should do. You'll pick up something from everything you do. You'll make a connection. You'll make a network connection. It's amazing how many people that I've met through my whole career, and yet they pop up time and time again. And other ideas I've seen that I can steal. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I will take great ideas if they're there. And of course, it's important that you do that. Look at other industries, get an edge, as I say, and just create your own style. But be that style, make it forward thinking, and try and keep moving the club and give people dreams and ambitions to go forward. As I mentioned earlier, be honest. Don't compromise your morals. If you say something that you promise somebody, do it. If you're going to do the right thing, don't be led astray. There are many temptations in football, and there'll be so many stories of transfer fees being done the wrong way and money being exchanged, etc. Don't go anywhere near it if you want to be in this industry. It's just not going to happen, because you should be in it for the right reasons, and because you want to be in it for a long time. So all those temptations that will come from the fame, and there's no doubt, if you're doing well with the football club, you get the appreciation from the community that you're in. You will you'll be on the media all the time. I mean, I've had it all, TV, everything. You just have to ignore that, and you just accept it. But you know that you're doing the right thing, and that's the most important thing of all. And as I say, don't be frightened to change. Change when the facts change. Don't change continually with the wind. It's very important that you are able to be flexible enough to change, and to admit that perhaps we should make a change because things have actually changed in our environment. But don't keep chopping and changing and leading the staff to do one thing and then changing it the next week to another. Support your manager, particularly on the football side. That's where it's important to be consistent and to give them consistency of communication. Even simple things like, I would always ask the manager, when do you want me to speak to you, before the game or after the game, or do you want to wait till Monday? And then we knew when we'd speak. And so it's important that we're consistent, and that we don't get too high with the highs and too low with the lows. Your job is to be the consistent barometer through the club, the heartbeat of the club, that keeps it on an even keel, but gives everybody belief on the way to go forward. And as I say, speak to people with experience. Like myself, I've had 25 years in the game now. I've probably done everything there is to do, from stadiums, training grounds, over 200 transfers, you name it. I've done it all. I've seen it all. Happy to give my knowledge and my experiences I'm trying to do tonight. And there are many, many more like me. So please don't be frightened to ask those questions, particularly if you actually end up getting a job and you are a chief executive, or you're coming up to a deputy, or you get your first job. Ask somebody if you've got a really difficult position, a difficult question. Ask somebody, they'll help you. And I'm never ashamed to do that. And it's one of those things that's helped me a lot, is when you approach it properly and with humility, people will always want to help. And so it's important that you don't forget you're not alone. Even though the temptation is to strike out and do everything yourself, there's a balance to do that, but try and do it with wisdom and with somebody to help you as well. Thanks, Diego. So that was my 1 hour of the battle scars of Aberdeen, Everton, and Aston Villa. There's so many more. I could go on for hours and hours about some of the real stories and challenges we've had. But I hope that has been of interest. And after Diego's had a few words, I'll look forward to any questions and answers anybody has.
Thank you, Keith. Really fantastic to listen to you and your experience. And as you said, it's never something that you can anticipate. There's always something that comes up. And as you've very well explained to us, you have to be on your toes and you have to be ready for what's coming. So I'm sure there's going to be some very interesting questions. I already see a few popping up on the chat. So we'll get to your questions in just a moment. Please begin to type them up, and we'll start sharing those questions with Keith briefly. I did want to mention an announcement, and that's to say that we're very pleased to say that Keith is going to be forming part of the lineup of speakers for our Master in Football Business and Management, which will start this October. So our objective, of course, is to have people that have experience from the industry that are able to share that. And of course, Keith, as you've seen tonight, is someone that has a wealth of knowledge and experience, and we're really glad to have him as part of the lineup of speakers that will be forming part of our master's program. I did want to touch upon our master's program because it is something that's coming up, and a lot of people are asking. There's a few spots that are remaining. They're filling up really fast. It starts in October. So I'll briefly tell you a little bit about this program, and then we'll go over to the questions that come for Keith. So please stay tuned. If you're looking to gain knowledge, to upskill yourself, and have an opportunity to learn from people like Keith and many others that have been in the industry for many years and are sharing that knowledge, our master's program is designed for that. Also, Keith touched upon the importance of networking, building relationships and connections. That's another element of our master's program that allows our students not just to have the knowledge, but also the opportunity to connect with people. You see there Wes Morgan, captain of Leicester City and Premier League winner, former student of our master's program. So many opportunities to connect with people in the game and also in other sectors that are transitioning. I liked what you said at the end, Keith, about talking to people and having an opinion. And that's what we do with our master's program. We provide personalized mentorship. We allow you to have an opportunity to have experts from the industry talk to you and learn where you're at today, where do you want to get to in your career, and what are the gaps you need to fill. And based on that, we create a roadmap with you together with your own aspirations and objectives. And of course, provide you practical experience. We have opportunities at many clubs and organizations in football for you to do internships, practical work, projects. We collaborate with organizations such as the World Football Summit. So if you form part of the Masters, you get a pass to attend the World Football Summit in Sevilla. And we have a graduation ceremony in Barcelona where we have all the students come on site to our offices and also take them to FC Barcelona, Espanyol, Media Pro, plus many other events and social ceremonies that we have within that program. I mean, I won't go into the details of everything, but a fantastic lineup of speakers, Keith included, people that come from clubs, governing bodies such as FIFA, UEFA, agencies, media companies, tech companies. So basically what we want is essentially is to prepare you to have the vision, and this is very, very much on spot with what we had as the session tonight, to have the vision of a CEO, to understand all areas of the landscape in football so that you're able to understand the business, the finance, the marketing, the digital, everything that you come across as a CEO, as we've seen tonight with Keith and many more other things that he's shared. So in order to provide you that, we bring in experts that have their area of expertise and share it with you in their guest lectures. So whether you're just starting out or you're coming from another sector, or perhaps you're already in football or in sport and you want to take your career to the next level, or maybe even are a professional player. We've had many professional players do this program. Whatever your situation is, this program is very practical, hands-on, and provides you the tools, the knowledge for you to take your career to the next level, whether it's the next step starting out or whether it's the next step to be appointed into a CEO of a club, which we've had, by the way, CEOs do this course. We even have a former prime minister. The former prime minister of Malta, who is now leading the league in Malta, is a former student of SBI. So you have an opportunity to network with people from all over the world. The program is recognized by a university in Miami called Florida Global University. So even though it's very relevant to the industry and it's led by football industry professionals, it has the backing of a university in the United States. And I'll leave you here with this quote from Wes Morgan, who did the Masters with us, like I said, a few years back. And he said, studying a Masters at SBI allowed me to gain a full understanding on the business side of football. They are top professionals and well connected in the sports industry. So anyway, I won't take much more of your time because we'll get to your questions. But if you're looking to gain an education, if you want to do a program that can take your career to the next level, that it's practical, hands-on, and very much football industry oriented, have a look at our program. It might be the right fit for you. Like I said, spots are filling up fast. We have people from all over the globe. And we'd love to hear from you if you have any, queries about the program. That said, we do want to get to the questions, Keith. So I know there's a lot that are coming in, so we'll try to tackle as many as we can. So let me go back to where we had some from the beginning, because I know there's a lot that are coming in. So just bear with me for a sec. So let's start from a few of these. So Ghanem says, as a CEO, what type of advisors, experts are the most vital for you throughout the season? If you rely more on directors, then what directors do you mostly rely on? So, what type of experts are important for you to have as your confidence people?
Sure. Well, I always come from the position that we're a football club and we're there to win football games. And so therefore my sporting director would be a key person for me. If it's a club that couldn't afford a sporting director, then of course the manager and his assistant will be the two people that I will look to form a really strong bond with. As I say, some clubs get carried away now with the idea that they're going to be more involved in new stadiums and different things, but never forget we're a football club to win football games. So whatever it is, whether it be sports science, sports medicine, any specialist that can help me win football games is who I really care about.
Excellent, excellent. Now, Lynn asks, what are some skills that you look forward to see in a CEO? So, good question. I mean, you touched upon them, but
I think the most important thing I'd look for when I'm looking for my replacements would be how they relate to people, and if people trust them, like them, and they have the ability to get people to come with them on a journey. And that's the important thing, is that you actually have that people skill, because as I say, football is still a human business. Despite the growth of technology in certain areas, it comes down at the end of the day to human interaction. And so it's how you actually handle people and bring them with you is the key thing that I would look for. Apart from that, it's the ability to quickly analyze situations and start to think about quick solutions and plans of action quickly. But the main thing is then to be able to sell it to people, and you need those people skills to do that.
right, right. In a similar line, Zach asks, what are the most used important skills that you need during a career and that you would advise for our audience tonight to work on, both hard and soft skills? So we touched upon that as well, but if you want to add something to Zach.
Yeah, I would say one thing I didn't mention tonight is the need for negotiation. I actually went and did a 1-week Harvard negotiation course, and I found that to be incredibly valuable. Now, there are many great negotiating skills online now as well, and SBI, I'm sure that you cover negotiation at some stage, but I think negotiation is key, because there will be so many issues, whether it be with players, whether it be with agents, whether it be with sponsors, whether it be with builders of stadia, etc. Everything becomes a negotiation. And as we all know, money is crucial, and to handle money properly is crucial. So I would say negotiation is, if you learn it properly, and it isn't just about what people assume is negotiation, there is a real science to it. And to really understand negotiation is a really big skill to learn.
Very interesting, very interesting. And, that speaks to continuing to always learn, right, and develop ourselves. You talk about doing a course at Harvard and, honing in on your negotiation skills. So that's something else that I think is very relevant to the question that Zach asked. The more you continue to grow and develop yourself, the more opportunities are going to come your way as well, not just through the learnings, but through the connections you make along the way.
Yeah.
Right. Naimesh says, Keith, that was brilliant, and sharing your experience. Thanks for sharing your experience. What would be an ideal business plan for generating revenues for transfer deficit spreads for a club that is relegated to second, third tier of the country after being in Premier League for many years? Good question.
Well, the normal reaction would be it's got to be based around young youth coming through. You've got to be able to have that best network locally to attract that young player that you can hopefully be able to get a premium for at some stage. It would seem to be that if you've got that deficit coming, you've been buying players too old, and the squad isn't balanced in terms of age. So I think it'll come down to an age issue and how you actually handle that searching for talent at the younger age. From what I learned from the question, that would be my initial assumption.
Very interesting. Very good. Very good. We have another question here from Joe, who says, how do you attract investors to a struggling football club? What would be the key messages pitch?
Sure. Now, well, as I think I mentioned and made it fairly clear, every one of the 3 clubs I've been at was struggling when I've arrived, and I had to sell the vision. And it will be the same with any investors. If people are not stupid, and they know that it's probably the right time to invest is when the market is low. So if you've got the right vision and you can sell them personally, as I say, your interpersonal skills will be important, and negotiation skills will be important. But if you've got the right vision and get them to imagine where that club could be with their support, and how much love they will be, or how much benefit it will be for their business, that's what you've got to sell people on, because there is a way to go forward, and clubs do go on and come back from the past and lead on and become big players again. So it'll come down to you being able to sell that vision and having clear idea of what it's going to take, and explain that to them, not just in some flowery, dreamlike way. Give them positive, specific examples of what needs to be done, what you will do, and what it's going to mean.
Very good, very good. We'll take a few more, and of course, we want to be respectful of everybody's time and Keith's time as well. So we'll take a couple more. But I see here Modi Mudzilawana says, what are more important baseline sponsors look for in order to make decisions to partner?
Okay, it's never each one. I've got to say there isn't a standard answer to that. Some will want brand exposure, and so they will want as many eyeballs looking at their brand as possible. Some will want people to use their product, to touch it, to get it in their hands. Some will want to create a database. So each of the sponsors' needs will differ, and you've got to be smart and be able to adapt. But do your homework and learn what that sponsor wants before you go there, and create a proper program that is bespoke and just for them. That's the only way you're going to be a winner in the sponsorship game.
Very good. No, absolutely. Couple more here. Enam says, "Hi Keith, thanks for sharing your experience. Please, is there any book you would recommend for an aspiring CEO or any person involved in football? I am a FIFA licensed agent, but would like to branch into working with clubs, possibly as a CEO in the future. Thanks."
I've got to say no. There isn't a book that I recommend. I would rather you put your time into reading more of things that are happening day by day, taking into account the changes in different industries, and creating your own style and your own philosophy. There is obviously value in looking at history, but there is no business book in football that's been written yet that I think is worth reading. You can read about all the great footballing things on the pitch, but there is nobody yet that's written the definitive book, as I say, in terms of off the pitch and how to run clubs. All you'll get is a historical story of what happened at the time, rather than real strategy. So maybe I'll take my time and I'll write it.
Well, there's definitely a good podcast that you can recommend, no?
Well, yes, yeah, there is a podcast, Football Insider with Keith Wyness, yes, on every Tuesday.
Right, right. So there you go. Football Insider is a podcast that Keith runs, and definitely worth listening to. So please make sure you can download that on Spotify or wherever you're having your podcasts. Football Insider. Very good. Well, we have time maybe for a few more. What type of program would you recommend for becoming a CEO of a football club? So this is David from Trinidad.
Yeah, David, there isn't really a program as such. The most important thing is to get into the club and to show your worth on the job. And whatever department you end up in charge of, excel and really show that you've made a change and made a difference in your department. People will soon see you and you will get promoted very quickly. But please, that's the most important thing. There's nothing that you could ever learn that prepares you to be a CEO, as I've been saying all night. You have to be a master of so many things, whether it be sponsorship, building, construction, catering, as well as, of course, football. There are so many areas that a chief executive must master, but you do that by learning one area that you're in charge of first and showing people that you've been creative, innovative, and worked hard at it. You will soon become the CEO after that.
Very good point. Very good point. I must say that our master program covers a lot, but we don't cover, how to deal with a manager that gets drunk at a Christmas party or a chef that commits fraud, or, we don't touch upon that in the program, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it's reality.
But that's reality, of course, yes. And it's good to hear it from someone that's dealt with it firsthand. So absolutely, very much something to think about. Of course, I'm making light of that, but it is very important that you do as much as you can, but you're always going to have to be on your toes and prepared for what's coming your way, as Keith has well said. Right, Tebo says, "Thank you, Keith. Very insightful presentation. What is the most important aspect of for starting a football club? What role does a CEO play from the beginning to make the club successful?"
Well, right at the start would be a very interesting time to actually develop a club. But of course, as I said, first of all, never forget you're a football club and you want to win football games. So let's look at that. Then you want to try and attract revenue to try and get better players. So you'll have to then look at facilities and what you do to attract the fans to come in. So, and also there'll have to be promotion of the club as you develop it. You'll have to negotiate with kit suppliers. You'll have to look at the right image and make sure that the whole new kit's attractive and the whole image of the club is attractive. So many things to do. but all they are is just exactly the same as I did at the bigger clubs, but just at a smaller level. But it does cover all those different areas, and everything is there. But you've got to be skilled across such a multi number of areas. So just it's a great, if you're going to start a club from scratch, it's a great way to learn the job.
Fantastic, fantastic. Kaz says, "Hi, are the classes only online or in person? And also, how much does it cost to attend the course?" Right. So, Kaz, if you want to get in touch with us, we'll give you all the details. But we do have 2 in-person events at the beginning and at the end of the course. Then the rest is all online with live sessions, such as the one you've listened tonight with Keith. Obviously, tonight it was a little bit different because Keith gave a presentation and we're engaging through the chat. In the actual master, you have an opportunity to speak, to ask questions, engage, be part of the conversation. Of course, here we have, we've had nearly 100 people tonight, so much more difficult to do in these types of sessions. But get in touch with us, and we'll talk about the course fees, and we'll talk about everything that you want about the program if you're interested. Victor's actually doing the masters. He's already enrolled, so nice to see you, Victor. He's in Brazil, and he says, you mentioned about knowing the people that know the culture of the club, that they are the key people on it. Why is this so important?
Could you repeat that one for me, please?
Yes. So he says, you mentioned about know the people that knows the culture of the club, that they are the key people on it. So I guess he's asking, why is it important to know those that have been for many years and understand the culture?
Because certainly in the clubs that I've been involved in, the history of the club goes from generation to generation, and you always want to attract the younger set of the next generation coming through as well. And history and tradition are important parts of that, because that's what your fans are passing down to their children. And so it's important you understand it and you're authentic about it and you speak properly about it, because it means so much to people. A club can be so important in people's lives. It's often the way that fathers and sons and daughters speak together only about football that then leads into other conversations. It plays a very important role in society. So you have to respect the club and its history. And those people that understand that and know the inside stories are very valuable. And as a chief executive coming into a club, you should respect that and learn it.
Excellent, excellent. Here's a question from one CEO to another CEO. This is Gunter Peters, who I mentioned before. He says, amazing presentation, Keith. Thank you very much. As a CEO of a Dutch professional football club, I have experienced how important stakeholder management is for a CEO. How important is it for a CEO, in your opinion, to have a good contact with local, national, and even European politicians? And how do you see the evolution towards the European Super League with respect to smaller and medium-sized football clubs?
Well, it sounds like a question from a CEO. I could tell straight away that's well thought out. So God bless you, Gunther. Now, this is a very touchy subject because you get me going on to how football and politicians should react. I have been very vocal about trying to keep politics out of sport. And what I tend to see often in the cases when I've been fighting that case is when it comes to election time, politicians want to be seen around the club. But when the elections are over, they disappear and they're not there to help you anymore. Yes, of course, you must be around the whole political issues around things like the Super League, etc. But really, there are the right pyramid of clubs and power structures to handle that. I think internally, things like the European Club Association, which I was part of, those are the lobbying groups that will get involved. I think for you. I think to spend a lot of your time being involved in lobbying politicians, I think would be wrong. But I think you should certainly play, as I say, a part in the major bodies, whether it be European Club Association or whether it be other groups that are involved, your league, etc. Those are the right areas where you can spend time and do it. But I think to get lost in a battle would detract too much time from your day job.
Good point. Good point. All right, well, we'll take 2 more, and then with that, we'll wrap it up. I know there's a lot of questions, so I apologize for not getting to all of them, but we'd love to have Keith here all night, but of course, we need to end this at some point relatively soon. So we'll take a couple more, and I see one here from Gonzalo Almeida. Hi, Gonzalo. Nice to see you. He says, Keith, what are the best ways to grow up in a football club? I guess he means to grow within the organization.
Again, it's being present and actually showing that you're giving some thought and creativity to the small jobs that you've got. I'll never forget one of the guys I hired once was a guy who cleaned sunglasses at a swimming pool on a resort, and it was just the way he approached his job, and he went above and beyond what everybody else did, and he was seen to be the best salesman there. And I knew he was going to make it as a salesman going forward. So whatever job you've got, whether you're putting out the cones on the pitch for training, whatever you're doing, do it as well as you possibly can, and you will be spotted, because that's what a chief executive wants, is people that care. He wants people that will support him, and he will always want to give to younger staff and give them a chance to go forward, because he got a chance once, and so I'm sure he would want to repay it. And so certainly the best thing you can do, as I say, is if you can find a way to get in, whether starting in the mail room, as the famous stories go, you start there wherever you get in, and then make your presence felt by showing that you're working hard and you're being creative. And if you see a particular problem that the club has, by all means, write to the chief executive, send him an email and say, look, can I discuss this with you? I would love if you could give me 10 minutes of your time, and then give him some thought that you've actually, you've looked at the issue, you've done some research, and just show that you care. Those things go a long, long way. And people have done it with me, and it's always been very valued. So yes, try that approach.
Very good advice there. Excellent. All right, we'll take the last question. I know there's a lot of questions about the master's program and the different courses at SBI. What I would suggest is get in touch with us. You see the email there, you see the WhatsApp, that is the business WhatsApp for SBI. Send us a message. We'll get back to you and answer all your questions about the different courses and prices, etc. But for the sake of trying to get as much value out of Keith tonight, we'll take the last question here based on the subject at hand. And I think we have one here from Kalfani Mwambo. He says, football is unique, and while we want to assume it is the same as other businesses, my question is, how, as the leader, CEO of a football club, roll out strategic objectives of the club to various departments within the club structure, taking into account that we need to generate revenue and at the same time ensure the objective to achieve performance on the pitch?
Well, that's the balancing act you've got to do. And there's one thing that we haven't even mentioned tonight, as well as how can the club give back to its own community. And so there is the social good that you must do as well. So there's probably a third area there that we've got to do. This is your job as a chief executive, is to balance the resources that you have at your disposal, to balance your time, and yet to lead in every way. And you'll soon find that your day is full, and you've got to keep on going 16 hours a day. And that's what it's going to take. And you've got to commit yourself to wanting to be the very best you can be, and to pay as much attention to each of those areas you mentioned as possible, and be present in all those areas. Not just delegate and then let it go. You've got to be there to help and assist. So your footprint and your thumbprint will be on the issues that will be developed, and so you've got to make it your own, but also give people full credit for it. But bring the team with you. They will do a lot of the work if they will follow you as a leader. So good luck, and I'm sure that you'll do a great job.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks everybody for your participation tonight, for your questions, and for being here. And of course, thank you to you, Keith. We've learned so much tonight out of everything that you've shared. I think we take away some very valuable lessons about leadership, about managing people, and also understanding, as you well said throughout your presentation, that nothing is ever as we plan, especially in the business landscape, any business landscape, and I think in football even more so, that there's never a straight line. And you've basically told us very detailed explanations of your time at the three clubs that you led, at your different stages in your career, and I think that's what we want as an audience, very hungry to learn about the business of football, right? To really know what happens behind the scenes, because as you said, you can read in a book, you can read the theory, but when it comes to the reality, when it comes to the practice, you need to understand it from the people that have been there, and that's why having you here tonight and forming part of the guest lecture lineup of the Master is such an an excellent part of this type of learning environment, that you actually, listen to people that have been there, that have seen the challenges, and then that have found solutions to to deal with the different issues, problems that they faced. So from my end, I just want to say that I really enjoyed tonight, and I'm really looking forward to our continued collaboration. So thank you once again for your time.
Thank you for everybody as well for listening, and good luck in your careers. I look forward to watching and hearing some success stories. Good luck.
Good luck, everybody. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. And if you have any questions about SBI and what we do, please feel free to reach out. We're here to help and provide any information that you may need. So thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, and talk to you soon. All the best, Keith. All the best, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.